Yesterday's prophecies, today's headlines. This is the Hal Lindsey Report. And now, Hal Lindsey.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hal Lindsey Report. The folks in Oklahoma and in Israel have something in common. They both want to build more shelters in schools and homes. In Oklahoma, they need shelters from tornadoes. In Israel, they worry about rockets, some 60,000 possessed by Hezbollah, 100,000 in Syria, and now word that Iran may have enough missiles and missile launchers to overwhelm Israeli ballistic missile defenses. A recent Iranian television broadcast showed a large number of transporter erector missile launchers called TELs or TELs. According to a report by the Military and Aerospace Intelligence Group, IHS Janes, Iranian television footage showed at least 26 TELs lined up in two rows for the event which marked their purported delivery to the Islamic Revolution Guards. The idea is to simultaneously launch too many missiles for Israeli air defenses to handle all at once. The Iranian Defense Minister, Brigadier General Ahmed Vahidi, said the delivery of such a large number of missile launchers shows the Iranian armed forces' massive firepower and their ability to give a crushing response to the enemy. He doesn't say who the enemy is, but it's not hard to guess. The TELs are designed to launch Shahab-3 ballistic missiles. They're based on a North Korean design. Known variants of the Shahab-3 have a range of up to 1,200 miles. They can carry cluster warheads containing up to 1,400 bombs each. Some doubt Iran's proficiency in launching a large-scale assault, but one thing is for certain. While launching missiles may be complex and difficult, stopping them once they're airborne is even harder. Meanwhile, like so many nations in the Middle East, Iran is in turmoil. Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani was recently disqualified as a presidential candidate by Iran's Guardian Council. Rafsanjani actually held the office from 1989 to 1997. He was endorsed by another former president, Mohammad Khatami, but at age 78, the Guardians deemed him too feeble. In reality, though, he was too much of a moderate, too willing to avoid conflict with the West. A recent television debate among the remaining candidates turned into a shouting match. And it's no wonder tempers are flaring. Inflation is running at 30%. The last presidential election, back in 2009, was ostensibly won by Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. But much of the country disputed the outcome, and the election was followed by months of protests, which were eventually crushed by the nation's security forces. It's becoming apparent that the mullahs and the ayatollahs feel they're losing their power base. And that's very dangerous because in order to get their base back, they're just likely to attack Israel so they can grab hold of things and pull them together again. Iran's instability makes for short fuses all across the Middle East. Israel's home front defense minister, Gilad Erdan, recently said, "In the end, rockets will strike here, and the rockets that will strike will be bigger than any rockets that have struck Israeli territory in the past. They will also be far more precise. We don't have enough batteries or interception missiles to counter the number of missiles our enemy possesses. The number of missiles will be high, and the missiles will strike highly populated areas." Right now, much of Israel depends on public bomb shelters, but these are too far away to be of much practical good for most of the people. A third of Israel's homes have some sort of safe room or bomb shelter, and that number is growing. But safe rooms only provide shelter from conventional weapons, not chemical or biological ones. And since things are spinning out of control in Syria, and Syria has the third largest stockpile of chemical weapons in the world, last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered gas masks and protective kits for all Israel. To be an Israeli today means feeling surrounded. You have sworn enemies in Lebanon and Syria to the north, enemy sympathizers in Iraq and Jordan and Saudi Arabia to the east, armies of terrorists across your border to the south in the Sinai, and beyond that, a rapidly deteriorating peace with Egypt. On top of that, you have sworn enemies within your borders in Hamas, in the Gaza Strip, and Fatah and the PLO in the West Bank. And looming above them all is Iran. Iran continues its work toward nuclear weapons. Think for a moment. What's going to happen with Iran and when? Do you think Iran will succumb to international pressure and finally stop its pursuit of nukes? And if Iran doesn't stop, what will the United States do? What will President Obama do? What will Israel do? A few days ago, two well-qualified men spoke out on the subject. James Cartwright, former chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Amos Yadlin, the former head of the Israeli Defense Forces military intelligence, published an unofficial document. In it, they concluded a theoretical sequence of events and their opinions about what could and should happen. They believe if Iran continues on its present path, President Obama will eventually overcome his reluctance to get involved in another war in the Middle East, and the U.S. will lead a series of strikes that will stop or severely set back Iran's nuclear efforts. According to a story in Israel Today, Cartwright and Yadlin believe America should lead such an attack, not Israel. The Arab states are less likely to feel compelled to react if U.S. is at the forefront of the action, and America has more capability to inflict serious damage to Iran's fortified nuclear facilities. Cartwright and Yadlin go on to say that the attack should be focused only on Iran's nuclear program and must not include ground troops. They believe President Obama will finally choose to act when he sees that inaction is more dangerous than action. What they say obviously makes sense, but what will the president actually do? What do you think? If you believe it's important to warn the world about the dangers of Islam, to call America to repentance for its breathtaking moral decline, and to awaken the church to the reality of Christ's soon return, then I need your help. These are the goals of the Hal Lindsey Report, but I cannot do it alone. Please be a part of this worldwide ministry. Send your tax-deductible contributions to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470470, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 74147. You can also visit hallindsey.com or phone toll-free 1-888-RAPTURE. Your support will guarantee the continued growth of this television program, and together we can touch the world. The U.S. Department of Justice is having another serious conflict with the First Amendment. Bill Killian, U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Tennessee, seems to have decided that Muslims have a civil right never before given to any other group in America, the right not to be criticized. Imagine a Christian going and demanding that. Recently, Killian was scheduled to speak at a forum called Public Disclosure in a Diverse Society. According to the Tullahoma News, he said, his presentation will also focus on Muslim culture and how that although terrorist acts have been committed by some in the faith, they are no different from those in other religions. No different? To illustrate his point, he listed several terrorist actions by non-Muslim groups none of which, incidentally, are in any way Christian. In fact, most don't represent any religion. Killian said Oklahoma City bombers Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols were both Christians. That's simply not true. McVeigh was an avowed agnostic. He said science was his religion. Nichols claimed to become a devout Christian, but only after the Oklahoma City bombing. Killian went on, "We want to inform everybody about what the law is, but more importantly, we want to provide what the law means to Muslims, Hindus, and every other religion in the country. It's why we came here in the first place. In England, they were using Christianity to further their power in government. That's why the First Amendment is there." Uh-oh. This guy is a U.S. attorney, and he thinks the First Amendment was invented to protect the government from the influence of Christianity? Actually, it was to protect all religions, including Christianity, from the government. The exact opposite. Killian's lack of knowledge about the origins of the First Amendment is stunning. I see the fingerprints of the American university professors all over his ignorance. In England, it was not Christianity that was being misused, but a specific denomination, the Church of England. Mr. Killian apparently views Muslims and Hindus positively, but sees Christianity as a source of despotism. Well, I've got news for him. The First Amendment protects Christians too, and you may find that out the hard way. It protects our rights to practice our faith and our right to free speech. As I've said before, the First Amendment doesn't guarantee a world without offense. Just the opposite. It guarantees that everyone will be offended, at least occasionally. According to the Tullahoma News, Killian will provide input on how civil rights can be violated by those who post inflammatory documents targeted at Muslims on social media. Killian said internet postings that violate civil rights are subject to federal jurisdiction. This prompted Judicial Watch to write, "In its latest effort to protect followers of Islam in the U.S., the Obama Justice Department warns against using social media to spread information considered inflammatory against Muslims, threatening that it could constitute a violation of civil rights." In some other countries, there are already laws on the books that curtail the right of free speech when it comes to criticizing Muslims. In America, so far, thankfully, it isn't so. First Amendment attorney Floyd Abrams said of Killian, "He's just wrong. The government may not, under the First Amendment, prevent or punish speech even if it may be viewed as hostile to a religion. At least not yet." Recently, President Obama gave a major policy address on the issue of terrorism. He spent a good deal of time listing his accomplishments in the war on terror, though he's careful never to use the actual words, war on terror. He said that while we will continue to keep an eye on terrorist threats, the war is pretty much done and it's time to move on to other things. Today, Osama bin Laden is dead, and so are most of his top lieutenants. There have been no large-scale attacks on the United States, and our homeland is more secure. Where was he when 2 bombs exploded at the Boston Marathon? The terrorists killed an 8-year-old boy and 3 people in their 20s. The bombs injured 264 people. Many injuries involve the loss of limbs. Of course, you can define large scale any way you want, but isn't this big enough? Maybe there have to be more deaths. How about the Fort Hood shooting? A lone gunman killed 13 people and injured more than 30. But wait, the Obama administration says that was an act of workplace violence, not terrorism. Nadal Hassan, a Muslim, had been in close email contact with Ammar al-Awlaki, the radical Islamic cleric who was killed 2 years ago in a U.S. drone strike. Hassan is accused of gathering his guns, going to the Fort Hood Soldier Readiness Processing Center, shouting Allahu Akbar, opening fire, and killing indiscriminately. If that's not terrorism, then the word has no meaning. The Ohio State University book Terrorism Since 9/11 lists 52 cases of terrorism against the United States between the years 2001 and 2012. Of course, the book only includes attacks that have been made known to the public. There have been others. God's grace and American vigilance kept most of them from succeeding. But that is hardly cause for less vigilance. A day before the president spoke, radical Islam reared its head in London. Lee Rigby, an off-duty British soldier, walked quietly down Wellington Avenue. 2 men ran him down in a car, then used knives and meat cleaver to hack him to death. An eyewitness said these 2 guys were crazed. They were just animals. One of the perpetrators found a person videoing, and with a perfect London accent, he spoke into the camera. Still holding a knife and cleaver in his blood-soaked hands, he said, "We swear by Almighty Allah, we will never stop fighting you until you leave us alone."
We must fight them as they fight us, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. You people will never be safe. Remove your governments, they don't care about you.
As the president spoke, peaceful Sweden was in the midst of a series of violent riots primarily perpetrated by Muslim immigrants. A member of the Swedish parliament, Olof Annemans, told Reuters there is a massive refusal by the Muslim youngsters of the basics of Western society. They take any excuse whatsoever to show that with violence. President Obama doesn't like the phrase war on terror, but we are at war with terrorists. So what's the holdup? It's a war we do not want and did not start. But since we didn't start it, and since their side hasn't stopped it, no one can make it go away just by wishing. It's dangerous if you try, especially if you're the President of the United States.
Want a great conversation starter? For the low price of $25, which includes shipping and handling, you can receive one of these unique Hal Lindsey Report baseball caps. Choose either this fashionable black cap with the Hal Lindsey Report in vibrant pink stitching, or the popular digital camouflage cap with the hunter orange lettering. One size fits all. Simply send $25 cash, check, or money order to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470470, Tulsa, Oklahoma 74147. Ask for the black cap or the camo cap, and remember to include your return mailing address. You may also place your order by calling 1-888-RAPTURE or going online to hallindsey.com.
Last week in Geneva, the World Health Organization's Director General, Margaret Chan, called a new virus a threat to the entire world.
When viewed against the magnitude of its potential threat, the novel coronavirus is not a problem that any single affected country can keep to itself or manage all by itself. The novel coronavirus is a threat to the entire world.
Dubbed MERS-CoV, the virus began in Saudi Arabia and has already spread to Europe. But so far, it has struck less than 100 people. That doesn't sound like a worldwide catastrophe waiting to happen, but WHO officials are urging healthcare professionals to gear up for a titanic battle with this teeny bug. It has a high mortality rate, better than 50% so far, and seems to spread fairly easily with close contact. It's a cousin to the mysterious SARS virus, which seemed to spring from nowhere in 2002 and killed thousands. Then, as mysteriously as it arrived, it disappeared. In the viral storm, the dawn of a new pandemic age, Stanford virologist Nathan Wolfe wrote, "Microbial threats will grow in the coming years in their ability to plague us, kill people, destroy regional economies, and threaten humanity in ways more severe than the worst imaginable volcanoes, hurricanes, or earthquakes. A storm is brewing." In Luke chapter 21, the disciples asked Jesus for signs of the end times. And in Matthew, Jesus also talked about these same signs, and he called them the beginning of birth pangs. Now, for over 50 years, I've been talking about these signs because the word birth pang indicates that they would first begin to happen, and then they would increase in frequency, scope, and intensity. He gave a powerful answer to the previous question that included this statement in verse 11. There will be great earthquakes in various places, and famines and pestilences. That word pestilence covers a lot of ground. It's an unfamiliar word to most people. It includes various diseases that attack us, but also things that attack our livestock and our crops. Today, according to Duke University, even with the use of pesticides, over 1/3 of our food is lost to pests. 1/3. That's a present-day pestilence of biblical proportions. Despite access to all the amazing medical breakthroughs of the last century, and despite spending almost 18% of the nation's gross domestic product on health care, Americans are getting sicker. A new government report says that in the last 10 years, the number of Americans with chronic health conditions has risen dramatically. The elderly today are sicker than the elderly of a generation ago. The middle-aged are sicker, too, and young people are much sicker. Antibiotics, once expected to eradicate many forms of disease, have had another effect. They kill off weak microbes so that only the strong survive to reproduce. Over time, this has created a new generation of superbugs that are resistant to all existing drugs. In March, England's chief medical officer, Sally Davies, said, "Antimicrobial resistance poses a catastrophic threat. If we don't act now, any one of us could go into the hospital in 20 years for minor surgery and die because of an ordinary infection that can't be treated by antibiotics. And routine operations like hip replacements or organ transplants could be deadly because of the risk of infection." The best known of the new superbugs is a type of staph infection usually caught in hospitals, prisons, and nursing homes. It's known as MRSA. It kills up to 40,000 people every year in the United States alone. That is pestilence. But pestilence can come in a variety of forms. In the last few years, New York and Chicago have been battling infestations of bed bugs. Some of the bed bugs have been found to carry the MRSA infection. Last summer, a town in India was overrun with tarantulas. In Africa, sleeping sickness is making a comeback. The World Health Organization expects worldwide instances of cancer to surge 50% by 2020 and 75% between now and 2030. Gonorrhea already infects 700,000 Americans a year. It now has a superbug variant that is almost impossible to stop. Measles is making a comeback in Europe. A parasitic infection known as Chagas disease is difficult to detect and has AIDS-like symptoms. As many as 8 million people are already infected, mostly in Bolivia, Mexico, Colombia, and Central America. In New Delhi, they have been fighting what they call the monkey menace for several years now. Everywhere from Texas to Pakistan, feral hogs have gone from a minor nuisance to a significant threat, doing billions of dollars worth of damage every year. In Utah, just 2 years ago, an outbreak of horse herpes was bad enough that in one cowgirl queen contest, the girls had to ride stick ponies. A killer cucumber bug hit Europe a couple of years ago, killing hundreds. Stray dogs have become a massive and sometimes deadly problem in Moscow. I could go on and on listing these kinds of pestilences. Others lie in wait. Smallpox was once one of the deadliest diseases known to mankind. The World Health Organization declared it eradicated in 1979. Vaccination stopped. The problem is this. While eradicated in the wild, smallpox still exists in laboratories, sometimes in weaponized form. The largest creator of weaponized smallpox was the Soviet Union. There's a good deal of controversy over how much of the virus still exists and where, but it's still out there, and everyone born after the late 70s is highly vulnerable to it. There are hundreds of virulent diseases, some of them weaponized, in laboratories around the world. This is not even to mention the many custom-built pathogens, biological terrors waiting for a mistake or a terrorist to release them on the world. Will the MERS-CoV virus ravage the world? I don't know, but it looks like it. But make no mistake, we're living in the age of pestilence, and the pale horse of the apocalypse stands close, ready to charge out of the gate. Folks, all of these details that we're hearing about what Jesus called the birth pangs that would herald his soon arrival are before us. And after studying these things for over 50 years, I have never seen all of these signs like birth pangs increase in frequency, scope, and intensity. This only goes to show you that we must be very near to the return of Christ. That's it for tonight, folks. God bless you, and may He give you wisdom of how to face what we're witnessing today. Do it with faith. And, God willing, I'll see you next week.
You've been watching the Hal Lindsey Report. To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470470, Tulsa, Oklahoma 74147. You can also support this ministry online. Visit hallindsey.com or call 1-888-RAPTURE.